Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to Moon Knight Adventures. So today, I mentioned before, we're finally getting these rock lights installed along with the light whips, so stay tuned. Alright, so like I said, today we got the rock lights from Stinger Off-Road. It's their Enligh10 series. So they had an older, like typical style rock light that was kind of that roundish shape. It was RGB, so strictly red, green, blue, and then they would mix to make the other colors. So now that they've come out with this Enligh10 series, there's a lot more options. So aside from, you got a little more lighting. If you can see, you've got multiple LEDs in there versus the old style only has like a single light for each color. So that's one thing. The other thing that I really like, this is why I ended up opting to swap out my old ones for these, is that these have a lot more options as far as the lighting capabilities when it comes to different patterns and functions. So that was one thing that really got my attention, and finally I decided I'd pull the trigger. So I've got 8 of these pods. Just a quick review of what comes in the box. You've got the rubber mounts for them, so that depending what kind of surface they're going on, then they can contour to them. And they do have a flat one as well. They've got the grooves that the wire will go in, so it helps with actually flush mounting it. You've got these 10-foot extension cables. So depending what kit you come with, it could come with like 2, it might come with more. Not sure. I ended up going with 2 of the 4-pod kits because that's what I get as a Stinger ambassador. So that's what we got. And then you got your LED remote, control it. The other thing is you are able, if you've got the newer Stinger Heighten unit, that you can directly plug these lights, the control box itself, into the back of the radio, so that you can actually control your lights off of there as well, rather than only Bluetooth or using the remote. So I will cover, there's a slight issue I ran into with that. So let's go ahead and jump into that real quick. All right, so as I mentioned before in one of my previous videos, the control box, there's multiple pros to this thing. So first of all, this thing's a lot smaller than the original. So just for comparison, this is the original, this is the old style LED control box for the rock lights. You're talking literally half the size, maybe a tad bit smaller. So that's the first big thing. The next big thing, there's only 4 wires that come out of the new control box. So you've got your 2 wires that come out that go directly to your lights. And then your other 2 wires over here, one is the main power, and then the other is what plugs in the back of your radio for the control function if you want to go off your radio screen. The other thing, with the old style, look at all these wires. This is a mess. 8 different wires if you did the 8-pod kit. 4-pod, 8-pod, it doesn't matter. With the new Enligh10 series, this is the same control box for all of them, because the idea with this, or the idea behind the smaller control box, how it's set up, is that all the lights can connect together on one line and plug into one side. And so essentially all you're gonna do is these will split up depending where you put this. I'm gonna try to put it either behind the radio or somewhere up there in the dash or floor area. And one will just run down the driver's side to the back. The other will run down the passenger side to the back. And that's how they got it laid out in the diagram on how to connect these. So that's what we're going to be doing. The other piece I wanted to touch on with you guys is you've got, depending on what model of the Stinger Heighten you got, if you got an older one, then I don't think it has this function to be able to use the RGBs with it. If you got the newer one, I know for sure you're supposed to be able to plug these in, and that's what I've got. However, I ran into a slight issue. When I talked to tech support, they had mentioned that the radio does come with the Sirius XM adapter, or the plug for it, and it has spare wires that come out, which is this black, the pink, and the brown. Now there is one on their website that comes with a clip or a plug. Mine that came with the radio did not have that, but I had the wires. So I had the option to either just hardwire into these, or I could opt to buy, which is like 20 bucks, a new Sirius XM adapter that still has the white plug that goes in the back of the radio, and then behind all this electrical tape is where the two clips are actually just supposed to connect together, no problem. I just opted to save 20 bucks and hardwire in. So if you have that option, if you don't feel like doing or dealing with the clip and all that and paying the extra 20 bucks, that's how you can do it. I will tell you, you can't see it since everything's already taped up, but the way they explained it to me is on this right side, you can see where the black comes in the bottom right, and then you got the pink and brown. Now, with the actual cord here, that comes from the control box. When you take that clip off, you've actually got a black, a red, and a yellow wire. Black still goes to black, the red goes to the brown, and the yellow goes to the pink. So make your lives easier. That was what they explained to me. I'll let you know at the end of the video once the install is done if that is the correct wiring diagram that they gave me, but my tech support guy did research it and say that those are how the colors are supposed to line up. So with that being said, let's go ahead and press on with this install. I'll show you how this all goes. All right guys, welcome back. So quick little update. There's been a lot of technical difficulties I've been running into. I've got most of it installed, but ended up having to call the tech support to figure out exactly what's going on with the rock lights going back to the light whips, why they weren't working properly. So I'll give an explanation of that towards the end, but right now I got to get back in the dash, so we'll jump in there. I'll show you how to pop out the dash and hook up where you need to, because that was something else I had to look up, was exactly where to plug the harness into the radio for the lights to be able to, or for me to be able to control the lights on the radio itself. So let's jump into it. All right, so depending on how you're wiring exactly, it depends on what panels you're going to be pulling off. If you're only going to be doing stuff in the back of the radio, then you only got to pull the control module off and then the screen and everything. If you're trying to run any wires like I'm going to have to do here in a bit, then I advise that we start down here, get yourself a plastic tool, and pop all this out. Everything is just straight clips. Same thing on this side. And it gives you access all underneath there where you can see some of the wires have already started running. Next up in this case is going to be popping this bad boy off. So depending on whatever's easier with your plastic tool, I usually have a better gap over here. All you do is just find an edge, work that in there. There goes that, that's okay. And just pull outward. All right, so now we got all these tabs popped off. You've also got this cord that's gonna plug in up here. And you've got this cord that plugs in down there. You're just gonna pop those out so you can fully remove this panel, set it off to the side. All right, so next up is taking off the radio screen. So first things first, I've already taken one out, but there's two screws here on the bottom that we gotta pop those out. And then after that, plastic tool again, and you'll work your way around the screen, slowly popping the tabs out. All right, so I got the last of those screws out. This is all you're gonna do is slowly pry around. And you wanna be careful with this, as once everything breaks loose, the screen can fall out completely. There we go. And once you get it, there you go. Next up, we'll pop these tool cords out, and then we'll set the screen off to the side. All right, so we've got the screen removed. We popped out the 2 cords for it. Next up, you got the 4 screws around on each corner. So we're gonna pop those out. This will be the last step as far as all the disassembly before we can start messing with the actual wiring and get the control modules plugged into the radio to work. And go from there. Get this last screw out of here. All right, so with all 4 screws popped out, we can now pull the whole module out of here and begin our exploration of wire bundles here. So essentially under all this mess, underneath here is where your control box is going to plug into. So at this point, I'll go ahead and do a quick explanation. So I initially did everything. I had technical issues with my camera not working. I got that resolved, but now the new issue, I got everything hooked up. I was going to do a retrace of all my steps of how to install this, but the lights ended up not working fully. And it was mainly the light whips I had issues with, as well as one of the rear rock lights was not fully lighting up. There was a single row of LEDs that wouldn't turn on. So I called Stinger and asked them, hey, what gives? You know, what am I doing wrong or what's going on? So there's 2 things. So first of all, with this new Enligh10 series on the app, when you go in to the app, go to the bottom, there's an option for like settings, and I'll do a whole screenshot walkthrough later, but you'll click settings, and then the next one is going to be chase settings. And when you go in there, you can change the amount of pixels. It's basically telling the control module how much power to be pushing through there. And then that was the first issue, so we got that resolved. The next issue was basically when you got as many lights hooked up as I do, between 8 rock lights and then 2 light whips, it's not enough power. The control module does not push enough power to actually light everything up, regardless what you change those pixels to. So we're stuck having to use one control box for the rock lights, and I have to do a separate control box for the light whips. So that's where I'm having to backtrack. I get to show you all these steps anyways on hooking the wires up. So without further ado, let's get to it. Hopefully that helps out anybody who's doing this install, solve any technical issues. So let's press on. All right, so here's a quick little screenshot. You can see my 2 devices. You'll click the menu button at the top left, click on setting. Next, you'll click on chasing setting, and that's where it's going to take you to the actual pixel settings that you need. The first one I clicked on is going to be the rock lights, which only require minimum 32 pixels to be fully powered. And then those would be my light whips that I believe, if I remember, should be 162 pixels per light whip, thus having 324. Now, if you have any other issues whenever you do this, if it's still not fully powered or functioning properly, then make sure to call Stinger. They can help tweak those settings, figure out what's going on. If it's a problem with the control box, they can get it swapped out or whatever. That's where we are able to diagnose that I was trying to run too much power through one control box to all my rock lights and the light whips. And that's where we were able to split instead and do just rock lights on one box and then the whip lights on the other control box. All right, so very quick walkthrough of what I've actually done for wiring. So you know that both of them, essentially, I got one control box here, one got behind the radio. I ran all the wires behind this piece fairly easy, and then the rest is gonna be tuck underneath, go all the way back. You're gonna go between the seat. And then here's the tricky part. So between here, I can still get up and underneath the center console piece. But what happens is, because I ran the wires across to the passenger side, you got on each side this little tab there. When you pop that out, there's a 10mm bolt behind there. You're going to pull that out, and you're going to get both sides. And then this whole thing can actually just lift up enough where you can tuck the cord underneath. All right, so from that point, I had the wires come out over here so that everything tucks underneath the rest of this. Popped them back out here. I was able to get it underneath the actual carpet and followed all the way up underneath. Got to this part, routed all the way up, and I essentially followed the seam back and even went behind the plastic back there. And then for the last part, this whole plastic piece right here, I mentioned coming from up there in front of the seat. And I followed all along up to this point, down and under. Behind here, see if I can pull this out a little bit. There's a couple holes in which go behind your tail light that I've shown in other videos, but there's a whole compartment that goes behind here, and you don't have to remove the tail light or anything. I didn't have to, but you'll weed it through, and then essentially the wire comes out from up there. And so that's the point where I just routed it here through the bumper. I came out up here. I just ran up the tire carrier piece. You can see where I just kind of zip tied to hold all the wires together how I needed to. And then they ran up and connected as is. So, I mean, that part's going to be different based on how your setup is, but that's how mine worked. The main point that would be pretty universal if you like this route is going through that hole in particular is where the wires come out through. I do recommend it's a lot easier to go up and in from the bottom here in behind the taillight and then work your way over, and then just get some long like needle nose pliers, or if you've got any of the like retractable claws and stuff, to be able to grab it and then pull it through to the interior part of the Jeep. That is probably the easiest route in my opinion than it is trying to weed through from the inside in here. It's extremely difficult to find that hole and get it to feed through, especially since some of the ends or the connectors for the wires are a bit fatter, so it can be a tight squeeze to get it through. All right, so since I've done the rock light install, I'm going to keep this very brief. So everything's still same locations. I'll cover those towards the end. But essentially what happens, you've got two outputs for your control modules. So you do 4 lights on each one on the driver front, one on the driver center, driver rear and rear bumper. And then the other set of lights, I did the front bumper, passenger front, passenger center, and passenger rear. Now what I did was I routed the control modules behind the dash versus the trunk. I had those wires go in the back on the bottom part of the dash through the floorboard up to the side, the driver's side there. Pop the panel out. There's a little gasket right there. You can slide the wires through, and you can see that there's a little port area through the fender that goes into the engine bay. So I routed mine through there, and that's where I was able to route both wires, where one connected to that driver front wheel well area and the other one went to the front bumper. And that's how I powered and ran all the rock lights. They all chained together. So I ran all the wiring on top of the frame to get to the rear where each light went. So that's the front skid plate. That's where the one's mounted. It's a steel package, so I just drilled a couple holes, bolted in. I have plastic fender liners, so I just drilled a couple holes in those and mounted my rock lights up that way. For the body of the Jeep, self-tapping screws. Get them small enough to fit. If you have to upsize the hole, make sure you slowly do it so you don't break the bracket. There's the rear fender liner. Same thing, just drill a couple holes, put the bolts in. And then the last one, I have an aftermarket rear bumper, so drill a couple holes in the best area you see fit, put the bolts in, call it good. Otherwise, it's a whole lot of just tucking and hiding the wires away and zip tying. So on that note, that's how the install was. I mentioned before I had the minor complications of like the lights and stuff not working, and kind of breezed through on how to go about fixing that, balancing out the two control modules, one for your rock lights, one for your light whips, stuff like that. Mentioned how to run the wires as far as like what my process and route was. So completely up to you. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully this helps you out. I know I've already had people asking me in the meantime like how I've been wiring before I could get this video done, as well as how I like the rock lights, where did I place them exactly. So that's that. If you guys have any other questions, be sure to let me know. If If you want to see any more content, more details as far as exactly how the lights were placed, if I missed something, let me know. I can backfill you. I can post a separate video, whatever I need to. So other than that, hope you guys have a great day.